Right. So last month I did a segment. It's this segment, funnily enough, on the number of leftists and feminists that have started to notice there's a problem with men.
Yeah, I think Shu was probably objecting to the fact that you called her a feminist, right?
Well, I didn't call her a feminist in the video, but she's
Sure,
in the
but in the
thumbnail.
title and thumbnail.
Yeah, we got into a little bit
I
of
can
an insult
understand why
thread,
she- yeah,
but I just appreciate that she was flirting with me. Really. Anyway, so point being, it was very encouraging to see.
What have I told you about older women, Con?
We all have our weaknesses. It was quite encouraging to see lots of left-wing women, women who formerly maybe haven't been speaking out on this as much as Chu actually has throughout her career, go, but hang on a minute, isn't there an area of life that we're not addressing here? Male dispossession, they're economically disadvantaged, they're
Academically disadvantaged.
Yep, sons of
killing
fatherless
themselves at
homes.
record rates. They're not succeeding in life. There's
Yeah.
so many things.
I would suggest that perhaps the lens be turned on left-wing philosophy in and of itself, but at least the olive branch has been extended. My only gripe has been that a disproportionate amount of these op-eds are authored by women in mainstream outlets, so it is being gate-kept out of the reach of men to provide solutions for ourselves. And so from standpoint epistemology, it's very difficult to speak from the perspective of that man, what's in his interest, if you've not lived that reality, because representation matters, after all.
I've been told that many times, and it is interesting that it's gatekept is the right word. It's being gatekept by feminists and women to talk
Yes.
about men's issues, which is interesting.
The exact people that are still percolating in the paradigm that's birthed forward these issues. And so I'm just going to do a bit of a follow-up segment. I present This Week in Men. If you want to find out...
Gay.
Yeah, we're not talking about Obama, sorry. So if you want
Part of This Week in Men.
That's going on Lotus Eaters out of context. Anyway, if you want to find out what caused all of this, you can subscribe to our website for as little as £5 a month and watch mine and Carl's discussion of the sequel to Evil Origins of Feminism, where this time it wasn't as dire as diagnosis as when we went through Simone de Beauvoir, and I tortured you with that. This was actually a pretty constructive discussion about building a frame of reference for re-engendering solidarity between the sexes.
Yes. But I think the important thing, though, is that the feminists have got a point, which is, well, men don't really understand women's perspective on the world. And that's true. But conversely,
Yes.
you don't understand our perspective either.
Yeah, so we appreciate the sympathy, but it's not quite empathy. It has to be ambiguous complementarity. And sometimes that ambiguity engenders a bit of playfulness, and that's the bedrock of flirting. At the moment, we're not even starting relationships, so maybe let's get that back a little bit. So I wanted to start off, going back to Shu. She tweeted out this cover. She wasn't the only one, but I saw this first.
God.
Yeah, not the most
awful, isn't
constructive.
it?
So this is the front cover of the West Australian. Don't know how widely circulated the paper is, but for our audio
What's wrong with
listeners...
them?
Yeah, it shows a young boy, and the headline is, "How do we stop this kid becoming a monster? Call for DV lessons at all schools to address the menace of toxic masculinity."
Is this the kid who had the Gadsden flag on his back?
No, I don't.
Right, this is
believe
a
it
different kid. Because there was another kid recently
Yes.
who got stigmatized by the media because he went into school with the Gadsden flag on his back.
Oh, yes, I saw that.
It wasn't just the media; it was the
Well,
henpecking administrators
yeah.
of the Longhouse in unilaterally
Yes.
staffed female education systems that said it's actually about slavery when it goes all the way back to the Revolutionary War.
So what's this kid done? He looks like he's 9 years old.
I think it's just a
And
stock
quite
photo.
clearly he's racist.
Yeah,
Can't
yeah.
you see it?
But he looks like he's about 9 years old. What could he have possibly have done wrong?
I would suggest maybe not wearing your baggy parachute pants, but other than that, I don't really think he's committed any crimes. And so the interesting thing about this was there was a reply from Critical Drinker somewhere down here, but here it is. Wow, it's a total mystery why male suicides have rocketed in recent years.
Yeah.
Because you're continually culturally denigrated with male competence being an instrument of patriarchal dominance. And so you're discouraged from ever progressing, even if you can get past preferential hiring and Equality Act legislation and the like. So it's not shocking that if from birth to death, you're told that by nature of your birth, you're an awful person, why men are just going, no, I'm checking out.
But the thing is, like, this drives me mental, right? So Bethany Heat, it appears to be the author of this,
Yes.
has taken it upon herself to stigmatize boys, right? Oh, young boys grow up to become monsters. Like the thought process that led up to this at every point to me is a moral failure, right? But this is just, and then on the front page of like a national magazine in Australia to be like, right, okay, yeah. So look, if you want any better proof that feminists control the world, we're stigmatizing half of the children in this country because they were born wrong.
And it's also, who's been raising said boys for the last 30 to 40 years? It hasn't been the fathers who are overwhelmingly not in the homes. Again, 50% of kids in the UK at this point have their father either not present at all or barely present because they're they're spread across 2 households. So not to invoke Fight Club, but why do we think after a generation of men raised exclusively by women that more feminism is the solution? I would suggest probably not.
I like as well how, like, this talk about domestic violence and toxic masculinity, all this against women, violence against women. And at the very top, it's win a trip to Amsterdam, the home of
Prostitution. That is a perfect point. Yes. I didn't even think about that. That
Yes,
is
drugs and hookers. Yes, please.
That's right. I'm effeminate.
Yeah, we'll send you there for free.
It's perfectly logically consistent because if freedom is the only thing that matters, then you can sign away men's obligations to women via chivalry by just saying, well, they're consenting to it, so they can totally abuse themselves there. Any kind of consideration for what might be good for them.
Just as a dad as well, right? Like, assuming this is a stock photo of a kid, it's definitely the wrong kind of photo to use because the kid looks fairly well dressed. His shoes are nice and shiny. He's polished them. He's got a fairly decent haircut. Maybe he's slouching a little bit, could stand up a bit straighter, but otherwise the kid seems fine.
But then competence is the problem.
Well,
as we know, it's too intimidating. And so we'll just go onto this bit. Speaking of male suicides, Alexander dates like I've got an interview coming up with him soon. He's spoken to Chris Williamson before. I believe he works for a AI matchmaking service called Keeper, which is trying to change dating apps to make people actually get married rather than just swipe through endlessly on hookup. So,
God, I love that we've had to outsource this to the Borg.
Yeah,
just
AI arranged marriage.
Yeah, we can't be expected to do it ourselves.
Yes.
Just dear godlike computer, give me a wife.
Yeah, thank you, consent-based feminism hasn't confused things at all. So he's gone through and done some research on the state of American men, and so. Some of the stats here, it says between 44 and 49% of Gen Z men have depressive symptoms and suicidal thoughts. So that's not very good to be inflicted on
only half
men.
of men thinking about suicide.
Yeah. Yep, not great. And it's particularly dropped off around the older millennial types because they're not as digitally native.
Right.
They don't get most of their lives fed through them for the sewage pipe of
38 to 45 is my age demographic, and I never think about suicide.
Which is surprising because
weirdo.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You work with us every day.
Yeah.
Like there's quite a few Gen X men where it's pronounced, but then that was the start of the curve, and the curve has just gone exponentially up. And that's, I think, a consequence of hands-off boomer parenting as well. That attitude has stayed with us of where we have been stripped of a place of cultural belonging. Yeah. And when kids are just raising other kids, particularly in daycare settings, then the kid with the least well-behaved standards infects the other kids, and that becomes your supposition throughout life.
Just half of Gen Z men have had suicidal thoughts in the last 2 weeks.
Yep.
Awful.
They've probably been listening to Connor talk about Barbie. But
they're probably dating Gen Z women.
To be honest with you, that's probably the one thing that's preventing them from killing themselves.
That's why loads of them did identify with Ken.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Maybe one day we can rise up and overthrow the matriarchy.
On the invisible horses, boys.
Yeah.
Only way out is through. The other interesting thing I found is that he looked at the percentage of trust in so-called manosphere figures.
Right.
And I think this is also part of the dispossession, because if you look recently, Jordan Peterson, particularly among men 18 to 23, is down to 10%, whereas Tate is outstripping him 2-1.
The voice for men at 16%. That's impressive.
That's pronounced among a particular demographic as well.
I bet it is.
That'll be later. And one of the reasons for that is because Peterson doesn't use TikTok, whereas most of these men in this age demographic are purely on TikTok, whereas Peterson's more on Twitter and Daily Wire. And he's also lent more into, after coming out of his coma, politics rather than men's issues. This is one of the critiques I have, I think, of Professor Peterson, who I really admire, is that I think he's more effective when he's talking about personal responsibility than to world leaders, even.
Well, I mean, he's a psychologist.
Yeah.
That's his job.
And it also seems that he has his life put together. Therefore, he is a leading example, whereas I would say Tate not so much. The other interesting thing as well was the percentage of minorities who consume manosphere content.
Oh, yeah.
So if I find the actual thing here. So it says particularly black men watching MGTOW content, which is quite surprising.
Watching what?
MGTOW content.
Men avoiding women content.
Yeah, men going their own way. So like monk mode, right?
Yeah.
So monk mode. Here it says, men feel more accepted when they act manly. The vast majority of black American men, say 67%, I feel praised and accepted when I act manly. So not emotionally incontinent, not men need feminism, as Caitlin Moran says. Overwhelmingly more than 50% do. The interesting thing here is that MGTOW content is pronounced among black men. And again, going back to the single motherhood epidemic, why do you think that predominantly black men would go, I'm writing off women if lots of women in their subculture are exactly like the single mothers that raised them? So again, more feminism might not be the solution.
I saw an earlier post in this thread that said that young men like trust Donald Trump more than almost anything else. And so, well, that's good.
Yes. Well, that's the interesting thing that someone observed. There was a Hill survey that came out that said 12th graders, so 17 to 18, have been registered as a factor of 2 to 1 more conservative than women who are trending more left wing.
Yeah.
So the people that are about to flood into the voting base are young men who are definitely going to vote Trump.
Why did Gen Z men trust Beyonce?
I don't know.
Trust her to do what? Well, at least Andrew Tate's ahead of her.
Yeah. Well, Joe Rogan's below Andrew Tate, which is kind of disappointing.
Really. Yeah, but I'll just take anything at this point.
I wouldn't take Tate. I'll put it that way.
I know.
Definitely
I'll take Beyonce, but I don't know for what reasons we're on about the moment.
I get the feeling that she comes packaged with a whole bundle of issues.
I think she's a Satanist, isn't she? I don't know. She's had like demonic imagery in it before. Very questionable.
Do you think that Beyonce lives in domestic bliss with her husband?
No, not with Jay-Z. Also mid. Anyway, so
Really?
Yeah, definitely not. Give me Sydney Sweeney any
But
day.
more or less mid than Margot Robbie.
Less. No, wait. Margot Robbie's more attractive than Beyonce.
Right.
Absolutely. Come on. So the pathologies
Alpha
begin.
mid.
That's right. So as soon as people have come out and said, well, men are suffering, then we get women try to stigmatize male competence. Yes. And so cowboy mentality has been blamed for the worsening suicide rate. Yes, men self-report the fact that 85% of them said as soon as they hear toxic masculinity, they're turned off. Overwhelmingly, 50 to 70% said when I act like a man, when I'm embodied, when I'm filled with testosterone, I feel better, so give me roles to do that. And a woman swoops in and says, actually, have you considered crying? That'll make you feel much better.
What I love about this picture here is average cowboy there.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
Like
Cowboy sipping on a soy latte.
Yeah,
he's definitely riding something.
Actual Californian soy boy doesn't represent what you're trying to describe here.
Yes. So a cowboy mentality of wanting to man up could be a factor in the epidemic of male loneliness. A New York University professor, Niobe Way, implied on Sunday.
Oh, I don't need her opinion on anything.
The experts have weighed in, right? Many boys are raised with what she calls the cowboy mentality.
Niobe has got an opinion on men's issues. Okay.
I'm sure she has a very stable and loving relationship.
Oh, dear.
I can do it myself. I don't need others. That's the mentality, often perpetuated by the father wanting the son to man up and not be so soft. The whole model of getting help is part of so-called femininity, the article that she wrote reads. Yes, all those present fathers. Definitely not a problem of not having enough fathers in the home.
And the thing is, that's not even true, right? Like, getting help is perfectly acceptable as a man, right? I mean, literally, your liege lord comes along and goes, I need the bannermen.
Yes.
He's saying I need help. That's fine. It's the purpose of the help and the way it's delivered and the way it's asked for that is the issue. If you go to your neighbor and say, can I borrow your spanner, please? It's totally fine. He'll lend you a spanner. You'll give it back. Can you show me how to fix the engine on the car? That's fine. It's the activity itself and the way that the help is asked for that's the problem. It's not asking for help. Like, what they're complaining is, I need help because I want someone to hear me blub for an hour.
Yes.
It's like, no, you're not supposed to blub for an hour.
Help should be translated as therapy in
Yeah. When they say help, they mean therapy.
Yeah, and this is why the meme goes around of men will literally go to X before men will start a podcast. Hello, before going to therapy. Like, yes, because we actually find that practical avenues to demonstrate our worth is what proves ourselves to ourselves. Yeah. Just sitting around admiring in emotion, we don't need the validation. Yeah. We need to be tested.
Men will literally perform a perfect 256-man Macedonian phalanx before going to therapy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Men will literally sack Rome.
Yeah.
Genghis Khan was, he had his benefits.
Well, he didn't have mental health problems, did he? He wasn't like, I'm depressed, I can't get out of bed. If only someone would hear me cry for a bit. This wasn't his problem.
So this is how pathological this woman is, right? There's a quote in here. Quote, women end up being the therapist for their husband and they're getting sick of it.
Oh my God.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were supposed to have a relationship where we agreed on the direction of travel and we're meant to be open and communicative with each other and we're meant to be decisive. And, maybe if I have a roof over your head, you might listen to my concerns. But is that not what we're doing here? Am I just...
All I'm saying, men, is never show weakness in front of a woman.
Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way. But I don't know if weakness is the right way to frame it though. Like you shouldn't be blubbing. Yes, that's not the way you should express yourself because you should comport yourself in such a way where that doesn't come to mind. But you should be able to voice your grievances and complaints and ask questions. But she's saying like you should outsource all of your emotional intimacy to a paid professional. Right? Thank you, Californian.
Yeah.
Not great. Way and Green's diagnosis resembles the American Psychological Association APA guidelines from 2019. I don't know if you've heard of this. They suggested, quote, the main thrust of the subsequent research is that traditional masculinity, marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, is on the whole harmful. So masculinity
But not to men.
was included as a mental illness, whereas other things aren't.
Harmful to who and by what standard?
The Longhouse.
Exactly. The Longhouse by the standards of feminism.
Yes. So never take advice from someone who regards your means of competence as a pathology, and also scarcely take advice from women on how to be a man. I would suggest. So let's
Unless it's Michelle Obama.
No, I think the statement still stands. Carry on.
So what are the solutions? Now, here's actually a man writing about it, and I was shocked that the new Statesman published this piece because usually they're an enemy publication, and he poses some interesting suggestions. There's a good diagnosis here.
Okay.
So, the disruption of the link between working class men and parties of the centre left is an epochal event driven by Western deindustrialization and the withering of union power and greater automation. So, the Industrial Revolution leading to the Sexual Revolution, leading to dispossession.
But he makes an interesting point here because the average trade union member is now a middle-aged white woman.
Yes, and they're less focused on material gains and more focused on diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
So, male concerns have been subordinated to female reputation construction concerns.
And also, I'm in the labor union. I work in HR.
Yes.
The labor union.
Yes.
Labor.
My work is henpecking.
Yeah.
Thanks. Despite the optimism that disruption would ultimately provide better outcomes, wages have declined in real terms since the 80s across the West. Wonder why that was. Maybe that was the mass influx of more populations into the workforce.
Honestly, I think it's also like that. That what happened in 1971.
Yes.
It's probably to do with that as well.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, they've debased the money supply.
We'll have to ask Dan.
It's a war on two fronts, I would say.
I think it's probably war on more than two fronts. But anyway, sorry.
This period has coincided with the acceleration of female workplace participation, declining fertility, liberalizing norms around divorce, homosexuality, and casual sex, and the arrival of the internet. All things I'm against. It has proved the perfect breeding
The
ground.
internet.
I'm waiting for the Chinese to EMP us back to feudalism.
Yeah, fair enough.
For conspiracies and ideologies that appeal to men who feel discarded by society. Faced with the paradox of a society whose value system and culture have become ever more radically egalitarian, even as economic divides have widened and work and education become more competitive, there is a natural opening for an ideology that simply dismisses egalitarianism as a lie and promises to give you the key to winning the rigged game. I like what I'm hearing. The red
this
pill,
is where Andrew Tate comes in.
kind of, yes.
Because this is exactly what he's saying.
He's an adaptation to the paradigm rather than the rejection of the paradigm.
Sure. But he does promote a rejection of the paradigm.
No, he doesn't.
In a way, he does.
No.
I think it's all for commercial aspects, though. I don't think he believes it.
Yes.
Well, I'm not saying he believes it.
I think credit where it's due. I think the guy's a genius because he's seen this as like a really good marketing ploy. Like, initially I was like, oh, this guy's pretty good. Until I then looked in more, but most people then don't really do. They're looking into it more, do they? And I was like, oh yeah, he's saying all the right things. It's like, oh, a pimping hose degree and you like to hit women.
Yeah. It's also...
Okay.
It's
I think
also
you're just talking crap.
Speaking about Attila the Hun, he reminds me of the barbarian warlord who arrives as the civilization's falling to sack it. And the reason is he doesn't speak about the ambiguous complementarity of men and women, for example. He says you've got to have a fleet of Bugattis akin to your legion of horses to then ride out and be so dominant in Darwinian fashion that these materialistic women fall at your feet because they are basically intimidated by your resources. It's not about complementarity and love. It's about commanding submission. And so that's actually a precarious place to rest your manhood on.
I agree.
And the only person that can rest his manhood on that is Andrew Tate, because everyone else is paying to learn how to be Andrew Tate.
It's a pretty narrow pyramid that he's at the top of, yeah.
Exactly. So I don't think he's a solution to the paradigm. I think he's just exploiting the existing structure. So he won't actually
I'm not
get
saying
out
he's
of
a
it.
solution, but he's not promoting the egalitarian paradigm. That's
No,
what I'm saying.
he's not, but he is working within it.
Sure. There's definitely room for him to maneuver, but that's because they've left such an open ground in healthy male behaviors. Yeah, if we actually had a healthy, constructive view of masculinity, Andrew Tate wouldn't exist.
Exactly. Well, this is one of the lines in here. He says, "For many who take the red pill, it's the old idea of a steady girlfriend and a fulfilling job that they long for." That's all they're just asking.
Oh, the red pill. What would you like? I'd like a girlfriend
Yeah.
and a job. Oh, I'm so red pilled. Oh God, it's tragic.
Yeah, I'd like lots of responsibilities and things to pay for.
Yeah.
Fascist.
I'd like people to not hate me for being a man.
Well, the West Australian disagrees with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, small child.
Yeah, you're going to get mocked in the Barbie film for that opinion.
Unlike
What's going on?
Yep. Unlike old school conservatism, there is no patriarchal concern for the well-being of women, nor any idealistic essentialization of women as gentle souls with the red pill. Tomasi advises men not to get married, avoid family creation if they want to become high-value men.
The red pill is a response to being oppressed. That's why.
Yes.
What would be the patriarchal concern about women if they are above you and you feel they have the longhouse bearing down on you? Why would you have concern for your oppressor? That's what that's saying.
Yes. It's purely retaliatory, which is what.
No, that's exactly right. It's
Yeah.
retaliatory.
This is why I don't think it's a solution, but I'm not shocked it's come about.
Yeah, it's totally inevitable.
Yes. And then Tate built a porn empire. Video games, pop culture, and porn are at once the enemy, but they're also the model. The world is a game, one that you can win with the exploits and character build. Women are just waiting for the right behaviors that will turn them into your porn star. The element of truth here, women don't like underemployed losers with the confidence of a damn towel, becomes an absurd rape fantasy about women falling at the feet of conquering barbarians.
Rape fantasy, honestly. But weird, isn't it? Well, it's just stigmatizing. It's stigmatizing those people who actually don't want to be losers. That's what that is. Yeah. But also like this. I just find this fascinating. It's like women don't like losers. Well, why have you turned all men into losers? Why have you done that then?
Yes.
But there's a good line there. The red pill moment occurs when men realize that the lessons of nice left liberal culture don't actually help them to succeed. Basically, yeah. Actually. And that's the egalitarian culture that's actually rigged against them.
Yeah, it is actually kind of a zero-sum game. In this paradigm is when you're competing for, so this is what we were talking about with Ivan Illich in Evil Origins of Feminism. When culture is directing men and women down the same avenues of competence, you've not made them men and women as in irreplaceable constituents of a household working together for the same ideal. You've made them squabbling siblings.
Yeah.
And so we're in the sibling economy. And that's why we're actually less attracted to each other, because we're more alike, but less compatible than ever.
And it's no surprise that men are like, you know what, I don't like this.
Yep. And so what's the solution in this article? Many looking at the manosphere will only draw negative lessons. How do I keep my son away from this? We need to sit boys down and explain why Andrew Tate is bad.
Many women will say that.
Yes. But it's a worldview that has emerged in the vacuum of a left that sees masculinity as regressive and has ceased offering coherent critiques of capitalism, individualism, and globalization. The best way to push back against the manosphere is not censorship, or yet more, we need to educate boys not to be sexist. Rather, we need to offer better modes of social critique that allow men and women alike to make sense of the world. Rather than a politics of individualism, men and women are alike crying out for solidarity. Instead of masculinity that thinks of relationships in terms of conquest and status, we need to make men and boys alive to grace, gift, and common purpose.
I mean, in a way, yes, but also in a way, no. Like, say, oh, what we need is better critique. No, that's not the problem. We've had way too much critique. What we need are solid normative value systems where we can say, you as a man should do this. And then a young man's like, okay, this is a really complicated world. But if I get this apprenticeship and start, hammering on the thing that I'm supposed to hammer on, eventually I'll have a house and a wife and kids. If I just hammer enough, on the anvil of whatever I'm supposed to do. That's, I think, really just most normal young men, that's all they really want.
Yeah, vocations and avenues for practical application. And most people aren't like 130 IQ autists. Again, hello. They just learn things through habit. Yeah. And when you've revoked habits, you revoke the cultural safety net that catches people that fall through the cracks. And so you've done a great disservice to these men and women who just aren't as engaged with stuff like this as well.
They just want a life path that they can follow securely.
Yeah, well, one thing we were talking about off air is how rewarding manual labor jobs are. Like I was digging gardens and putting up fences before this, and you were making something tangible before you. You're serving a useful purpose. You're making something beautiful, frankly. So you're and the fact that you are knackered at the end of the day and you step in the shower and you get all the mud off and your muscles ache, there's a sense of fulfillment there from how exhausted you are because you proved yourself to yourself. You don't get that from being Dino typing in his marketing job with muscles massive, but the strength actually doesn't go.
I sent 500 emails today. Great job, Dino.
Yeah. off your pops at 500.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But
time to go to the gym.
Yeah. Here's where we lack solutions. Okay.
Yeah.
This article.
Ooh.
In praise of heroic masculinity. The Atlantic.
Surprising. The Atlantic.
By Caitlin Flanagan.
Okay.
Yes.
Which?
Right. And again, you know what?
She's probably not.
She's not.
I don't know.
She's actually very, very sympathetic. but sympathetic to the problems that can't provide a solution because you just don't know. It's like I wouldn't presume to tell women how to deal with menstruation, for example. I just wouldn't. Like, because I'm never going to experience that. Like, I'm never going to talk about the physical sensations of childbirth because that would be mad. So to try and talk about the solutions for men from an embodied perspective, you just sort of can't.
But look at that tagline: "Teach boys that strength can be a virtue." Like in no other period of history
Yes.
has that been necessary, because all of the cultural messaging that young men would have had was strength. I mean, it predicated on the idea that strength is a virtue.
But they're also more embodied. Again,
Oh,
like
absolutely.
grip strength has declined.
It's not even grip strength; it's moral strength, if nothing else. Right?
Mm.
You know, it's not even. I mean, obviously, physical strength is an important part, but just the strength to hold the line on your own standards and your own red lines.
But I think they're interconnected. This is something that
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to nick from Stefan.
Why I keep getting sacked.
This is something that Stefan Molyneux said the other day, actually, so I'm going to steal it. It's that you don't know what you believe until you're strong. Because if you operate in the world from a position of physical weakness, you actually can't assert yourself because you're constantly afraid of being physically overpowered.
Yep.
And this is something Nina Power pointed out to me. The etymology of virtue is actually from virility. It's implicitly associated with masculinity and testosterone. So you do actually need to be embodied. Like ditch your fluoride toothpaste, start eating meat, take cold showers, and like because if you reintroduce difficulty back into your life, that's just decadent. You look like Shrek in that bloody tub in your back garden. But if you reintroduce that difficulty in a very comfortable world, you will feel more ingrained with yourself, and you will feel more assertive. Like you'll be speaking with your chest rather than being a chestless man.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some good bits in this article. Like she points out, toxic masculinity was coined in the 1980s by Shepard Bliss, and he was trying to create the mythopoetic manhood moment. So he was trying to distinguish healthy masculinity from the kind of masculinity he'd grown up with his dad, where his mum was being beaten up. So he had good intentions, but it's just been co-opted by the feminists. And then so she starts pointing out the obvious. If the noun masculinity can be modified by the adjective toxic, then there must exist its opposite, which can be revealed by a different adjective. What is it? The opposite of toxic masculinity is heroic masculinity. It's all around us. You depend on it for your safety, as does the author. It is also entirely taken for granted, even reviled until trouble comes, and it is ungratefully demanded by the people who usually decry it. It's like the concept.
Totally true.
Heidegger has a concept called unready to hand about technology. You don't realize the device you're using until it breaks. And so you don't realize the virtue of men until you can't open a pickle jar or you need someone to rescue you from a burning building.
Yeah.
And so we've entered such a comfortable gynocratic longhouse society that until a proper crisis strikes, we won't be able to reveal the virtues of masculinity. Toxic and heroic masculinity can exist in the same man. There are plenty of examples of a bad man who sees something unjust and who suddenly, if only for 5 minutes, takes time to stop another man from harming someone else, puts a stop to it. For that tiny stretch of time, he's connected with greatness. And it concludes with, what if we understood that boys are born into a destiny, but not a pathology? But this is frustrating because you can say all this as an abstraction, but you're not living it.
Yes.
And so it compounds this problem here, which comes back to Tate. And she says, have you ever noticed there are a lot of otherwise reasonable young men who admire Andrew Tate, a vile and widely watched influencer facing charges of rape, human trafficking, and organized crime, which he denies? That is because the only thing they've been taught about masculinity is that it's a dangerous and suspicious and possibly socially constructed fantasy they must cast off in every way possible. They're so confused that when they finally see a thug like Tate reveling in his talk of dominating and abusing women, they think he's admirable. At least he isn't telling them that they're bad seeds. If we don't give these boys positive examples of strength of virtue, they will look elsewhere. But you aren't one. I'm sorry, I understand the principle of saying this. Like, I agree, totally. Name them. But you can't, because you conflate Peterson and Tate in the same sentence. You don't know what positive examples of strength are because you can't manifest that.
But also, like you said, it's nowhere instantiated in the world. Like I always come back to the example of my son being told at school he shouldn't punch someone who punched him in the first place. He shouldn't punch them back.
I was told that all the time.
Yeah, I know. And I had a big argument with the school about this. I was like, I don't care what you say. He's got my authorization.
Yeah. The schools draw false equivalencies between the person that instigates and the person who retaliates.
It's a woman who is in charge.
Yes.
I fought a bully at school, and obviously went to the headmaster, and they're like, right, well, Callum, you can't be doing this. I was like, I can't promise that, because I've been told, I've been brought up to like do what's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes doing what's right involves,
Hitting
it's like
back.
I mentioned last time I was here. Every man has a monster inside him. A good man knows when to use it.
Yes.
Like, if someone's picking on my friends again, I'm gonna have to fight them. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
And but it's right. Like, I think every man has got a rite of passage to be a man.
Yeah.
Must get punched.
Yeah.
I think every man at some point in their life must get punched. I don't think you know how to become a man unless you. It's almost like learning boundaries.
Mm.
You know, you push things too far and you get hit. You go, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I kind of know where a line is now, but you also know how it feels to kind of bit of confrontation, and you learn from it.
Be in a fight, manual labor, be a dad. I think those are 3 very strong participation rituals to be able to call yourself a man. And so I just wanted to finish with a little thing that I wrote a little while ago because I can't really put it any way better than this. Kelly J. Keane, she's fought to let women speak, voicing their concerns about men entering their protected spaces on matters concerning men. I think men would quite like to do the same. So if mainstream platforms would allow us to fix our own problems rather than letting us keep being henpecked, we'd really appreciate it.
You appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters? You can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the book clubs, this one on Ted Kaczynski, the Industrial Society and its Consequences. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.